All right, so here's the first question we're going to tackle tonight, and if each of our speakers you can give your own answer to it. And the first question is, what is the difference between discrimination, intolerance, and bias, if there is one?
I think it's a matter of personal choice sometimes. Like some people were like, I don't like okra, and you were right not to like okra. But when that turns into law, policy, that is discrimination. I'm 75 years old, and I was born the year that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations. And having been a witness to civil rights, having gone through segregation, there were times when there were people that wanted to help, but it was illegal. So I think that discrimination is when the laws are applied to. Intolerance is just you're not nice. You use your emotions and your meanness to not be kind to people. Biases we all have. We all have biases. We all have things we don't like. And so as Scientologists, as humans, we have to recognize our bias first of all. And Black people as children, we were told to stay away from white people, that they were dirty and they were dangerous. That's what we were told as children. And that you had to be respectful to all adults, but you did not, get involved with them as a culture. So we don't think of Black people like that. But part of the reason we felt that way is our history in this country. My grandfather was lynched after World War II. So we know that horrible things happen in this country just because you're Black. So just the discrimination, if it's legal, if it becomes a law, that is definitely a problem. Intolerance is just you're not doing anything. And bias is being human. There are things, some of us don't like okra. You just don't. And no matter what you do to it, I'm not going to like it. But I'm not going to be mean to it. And I'm not going to make having okra.
Thank you. Now I can't get okra out of my mouth. So for me, bias, I think, is generational. It is a generational prejudice that was possibly passed down to us. And it usually comes from folk tales or assumptions, and it's not based on facts. But on the other side, discrimination is seeing how different someone is and still choosing to be prejudiced. So recognizing their background, recognizing their race, or the culture I come from, caste or classism, seeing that they are different and not choosing to come on the same playing field. Intolerance is seeing only the self's perspective and negating the other person's perspective. So it usually comes from my values are greater than yours and diminishing the other person's value. So I think the three do interlap in some way, but bias is usually passed down or generational or based on assumptions. And intolerance and discrimination can be adjusted based on our values or attitudes. Thank you.
So when I read that question, I was like, I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know the difference, but I know that they're all bad. They all need to be stopped, and they all need to be educated against, because bias means all okra weren't equal, right? But bias could lead to intolerance. Intolerance could lead to discrimination. We allow it to grow in people's minds and hearts, and then people become in a leadership position or become able to make laws that will cause discrimination. I don't think the Holocaust just started with discrimination. It started with all the previous stuff. So I think that we all have a certain kind of bias, and we need to work against it. We need to stop letting it affect our feelings towards others or actions towards others as much as we can. And that's one of these struggle that we do as people of faith in our lives. No one's perfect. We're not angels. We have things in us that we need to work on. And those are three of the main things that we're going to try our best to get rid of our minds and hearts from dealing with others. And it's not easy. It's not easy to get rid of bias. But I think when we work together, we can prevent discrimination. We can promote not just tolerance, but also love towards each other. Because when you tolerate someone, like, I hate you, but I'll tolerate you, right? No, we don't more than that. We have more than just tolerating each other.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the difference for me, I mean, I think I agree with all the panelists in that we all have a bias. I mean, I'm surely not a Laker fan. I'm surely not a Dodger fan. I'm from Northern California. And it can be healthy in that sense, in the sense of games and you know, some of it is going to be natural if we have family involved or things of that nature. You know, and so for me, intolerance, I think if we look at the definition of what tolerance is and not intolerance, but tolerance would be the willingness to experience something different or someone different, right? If we travel to another country, we want to tolerate that culture. We want to learn about it. We want to know about it. And so if we as individuals are intolerant, we're basically just saying, I have no interest in what you were doing or saying, therefore, you know, you do not exist. And then when, you know, discrimination, right, I think that is an act of doing this to be prejudiced against someone or something and to not let that person succeed or that group succeed. And that is definitely, you know, a situation that needs to, as they have all said, be overcome and stopped, right? But you know, bias is natural. It's kind of in human nature a little bit, you know, in a playful or fun way. And tolerance is not being willing to be in someone's spaces or near them or be around them or experience them.
Thank you very much. Okay, here's our next question. We'll work it back the other way this time.
Okay.
At what point does discrimination, intolerance, or bias become a violation of someone's human rights?
Yeah, to me, this is an interesting question. You know, you really have to, 2 or 3 parts to this. First and foremost, you have to know what your human rights are. Because if you don't know what they are, and you do not understand them, you're going to have no idea when they start to be discriminated against or violated. And as we've seen in history and in past, it's not a big one swoop fill where something just happens, but slowly and surely things start to get set in, right? We spoke about laws and things of that nature. Something will make a minor change or a minor stop and things of that nature. And so that would be the first thing is you have to really understand and know what your human rights are. And I think the point where it becomes a violation is when your own self-determinism and your ability to choose or have freedoms become thwarted or slowed or stopped along any one of those 30 human rights. And at that point, that's when they start to become violent.
Not much to add. I mean, that's pretty much when our actions, if it's a thought in your mind, still evolving and still growing and still developing in your mind, then it's not causing any violation to others. But once we start acting upon it, once we think that we have the right to take people's right, that's when it becomes a violation. That's when you think that people do not have the right to practice the faith that they want to practice. When people don't have the right to teach their children what they want to teach their children. All kind of things, that becomes a violation. So these, as long as it's a thought in their mind, we're safe. But again, to be false, we come in act, that's when it's a violation. That's how I understand it.
So I had 3 points written down. The first one was when an opinion is disrespected, it is a violation. when intolerance, bias, or discrimination does not serve the common good of society, it is a violation. When it perpetuates loneliness, then it is a violation. And I want to talk about loneliness a little bit. Alexa McHale writes in the Entrepreneur magazine about the loneliness epidemic, where because of remote work and uptick in major moves away from metro cities, more people find themselves separated from a strong support system. Dr. Vivek Murthy, he says, the pandemic has had a number of invisible costs. Increase in loneliness and increase in mental health strain is part of the cost. So when someone's view is shared, when they talk about their opinions and their values, and a group decides to discriminate against it, then that person who expresses their views either chooses to isolate themselves before other people isolate them in fear of judgment, or the larger group or the group in power isolates this person for sharing their opinion because it doesn't go with the larger narrative. So in one way or the other, there's one person or there's a minority group which gets neglected and kind of sends themselves to loneliness. But imagine the skill and the talent that this person has when they share their opinion. We lose that skill and talent, whether as a company, as a school, as a college, as an organization. We lose this skill and talent because they choose to isolate themselves. They choose to move. But also for that person, they lose their support system. What a shame that is. So nobody wants to go where they're tolerated. They want to go where they're celebrated. And of course, we can't just celebrate anybody, but when we understand their background, when we understand who they are, why they are saying what they're saying, then it gives us more opportunity to at least give them a seat at the table, to share the same playing field as us. My question is there not enough space in our society for two different opinions to coexist? Now, Article 27 talks about the right to participate in society. And Article 29 talks about the social responsibility and respect for the rights and freedoms while having public order and general welfare of the society. So mutual respect is necessary. We need to agree to disagree. We need to know how to conversate, talk to people who are different than us. I think that is priority. And when does our human rights get violated? When it causes public unrest, when it causes chaos, when it causes disruption, it is a violation of human rights. And I wrote down here, which was very important to me, if we don't know how to coexist by mutually respecting each other's difference, we fail as a human race. No two people are the same. No two backgrounds are the same. No two stories are the same. So why should views, perspectives, and thoughts be the same? And I want to say that again. If we want to flourish as a human race, then learning to communicate our needs and finding space to coexist respectfully is important.
As an African American, discrimination is part of my childhood. When I go to the South, the first time I went to Texas and they said white water, colored water, I thought the colored water was going to be green or blue. And that's when I understood that it's different to be black. And there were signs, no color, no black. There were places, even in California, where you could not go. From Compton, there we were surrounded by what was known as sundown city. Do you know what those are? Yeah, you do. Places where African Americans would not be there after sundown. And if you were, you would be escorted out of town by the police, or you would be forced out of town by a citizen. So discrimination is real for me. There were schools that you couldn't go to. Even the Girl Scouts, we were one of the first Black Girl Scouts that were we kind of forced them into letting us be part of a Girl Scout because Black girls are not allowed to be Girl Scout, teenage girls in the 50s. So demonstration, discrimination, and if it's legal, is part of the life that we have. And as long as the law is there, it becomes a problem because no one can break the laws without consequences. I think that now we still have, with all the George Floyd and this, that, and the other, Black moms have to sit Black boys down and give them a talk about how to deal with police. And white parents don't have to do that. If you're stopped by a policeman, you do this, you do that, you don't move, you have your insurance, you have this, you don't talk back. And if they decide to arrest you, you go with them, you call us, and we'll be there to help you. And that is America now, and right now. So the history of discrimination, which is part of the American fallacy, the American dream that for some people is still a nightmare. You can't let it stop you. You begin to get educated, you begin to do things together and collective group of, like Josephine technical group of all colors. And together we can get things done. Intolerance is harder. It's a lot harder because, like one of the panelists said, it's taught. But if you deal with little kids, like kindergarten kids, they haven't been taught intolerance. They kiss and hold, and this is I remember some social media thing about these two little boys that thought if they dressed alike, people couldn't tell them apart. And one was Black and one was white. Children don't have that. They have to be taught into hate. So it's our job as community members to teach people to love each other and to make sure that we're not segregated. You are afraid of what you don't know. That's natural. That's human. But when you get to know them and know that the skin is only the thing your insides are wrapped in, that basically when you do surgery, your blood, your organs, all of that are the same, then children begin to love each other. That's what this curriculum does. So that's my opinion.
Thank you very much. Okay, you ready for the next question? In your opinion, what is the root of bias, discrimination, or intolerance?
Well, just to repeat, we're taught it because we are afraid of what we don't know. We're afraid of what we don't know. And it's our job to get to know people. The other thing is money. I think that's very important. That by oppressing one group or another, making them work unceasingly, making them get paid less, do all the kinds of nonsense that happens not only in this country, but all over the world. I have been all over the world to see how girls are sold because they're less than men in the opinion of the country, or that certain skin colors or darker skin colors are treated as though they're not as intelligent, or the other way around. Some people that are genetically the same hate each other, so they don't know each other. So, and the other is power. We're dealing with that now. As more young kids of color get to voting age, and they start thinking about things in a different way, that's frightening to people. And as they begin to learn about the value of their culture, that's frightening to people. So they don't want them to learn that they have descendants of things and things. They don't want us to know what kind of discrimination we have been exposed to and how our parents have overcome that. And a lot of people have overcome that. So ignorance is really an important part.
Thank you.
I think in my work with South Asian women, I see that bias is generational. What is set against them and what is reflected toward them is something that they have learned over generations. And the people who discriminate against them refuse to recognize and realize that we're in the 21st century, with our modern technology, things have changed. And I don't need to change. I don't want to change. So I think it's high time that people challenge themselves or get a little uncomfortable with differences. Like it was said, a lot of people discriminate or choose to be intolerant because they have the money. I have the money. I have the power. Why should I come down from the level? So there's a sense of entitlement. There's a sense of also complacency, where they can stay in power and not see the differences and help out, give a helping hand to those who are marginalized or minority groups. So yes, theory has a great tagline. They say seek discomfort. That is their entire merch. That is their entire marketing strategy. Jubilee Project says live deeply. And I think these two are wonderful phrases where if we are able to take that, then we grow as human beings. We grow as a human race. One thing that I have learned in my life is kind of this quote that I gave myself. The rate at which an individual grows is directly proportional to the quality of human living. I want to say that again. I'm an Indian, math and science are in my brain. So formulas do well. The rate at which an individual grows is directly proportional to the quality of human living.
Very good. Yeah, thank you.
So the roots of bias, discrimination, intolerance, there are a few people who are evil, who live on this by promoting by appealing to others. That's how they live. That's how they make money. That's how they make profits. Let's make them less than us so we can invade the country and take their priorities. Right? They did that over the centuries, and that's the group of people who are making profit out of it. But the majority of people are either ignorant or afraid. If you ask anybody, people live in isolations, by themselves, by their own kind. You ask them about somebody else, they have all these kinds of misconceptions in mind, right? All Black people are that way, all Muslims are that way, all Jews are that way. But once that person meets an individual from that group they have bias towards, they'll change their mind. Most of the times, oh, look, they're just like me. They're just humans like me. They just have the same fears, same concerns. I remember I practiced dentistry in Palestine for a few months before I came. And I remember I was sitting down in the clinic that I was practicing. And I looked out, and honestly, it sounds like a joke, but there was a rabbi, and a Christian guy, and a Muslim guy. And all three of them, all they cared about how much it's going to hurt your blood tooth. That's their main concern. They're all humans, right? We get to know each other. We have less bias. When there is a lot of fear mongering, fear propaganda that's going on, it's going to lead, especially those who are working in the media, have a big role, they have a big responsibility to educate the masses, to prevent the hatred going through your means. So unfortunately, fear has been one of the main reasons that people develop bias, intolerance, or discrimination towards others. So if we get to know each other at these meetings and these gatherings, when we get to meet people from different kinds of communities and backgrounds, we get to know them more. We develop a human image of them rather than just the other. And when we learn more about them, we will be less afraid, and that we will remain to decrease the amount of bias or hatred or discrimination towards others.
I know you're not going to believe me, but his answer is basically my answer. I completely agree that discrimination intolerance is specifically discrimination is coming from a small group of people who are pushing hate and pushing ideas and beliefs, and it gets spread through and things of that nature. I've been around a lot of people in my lifetime. I've traveled to many places. I'll just use my coaching voice. The vast majority of people that I've come across are good people, and they're not discriminated. I do. Yeah, that's really cool. That's okay. They can hear me. I agree that in certain areas of even this country and others, if you're not introduced to a culture, you are going to have what you've seen as your viewpoints and where you've seen it from, right? And that, in my opinion, is where some discrimination can be presented to someone and things of that nature. But, the majority of people are good people and they're not discriminative. And this is a small group who are evil and who are pushing hate. And unfortunately, it gets spread really, really quickly in our day and age with internet and things of that nature.
Thank you. All right, here's the next question. Currently on Earth, and at many points in our recent and distant past, entire cultures or countries have discriminated against a people or a class or a race, etc., resulting in incredible human rights violations and even genocide. While each instance had its own reasons or things that brought it about, do you feel there is a common cause or factor that brings this about? And what is it?
Yeah, so my response is going to be similar to my last response, right? And I think it's been mentioned, the genocide that happened in Germany and things of that nature, where it's not just quick and it happens, right? Things in history start off very slowly, suddenly a person or a people can't do this, and then they can't do this, and then they can't do this. And it just sneaks under everybody's awareness level. But going back to the question, the long question, I do believe that there is a common cause and there is a common factor. And I do believe that it's a very small group of people, who have very ill intentions and want power and are pushing an agenda. And then it slowly comes through. And again, it goes back to knowing and understanding what your human rights are, so you can recognize when it starts to happen, and we can come together as a group and we can protect each other's and not only our own human rights, and ensure that it does not occur in history, does not repeat itself.
Thank you.
So, not to talk again about the reasons for bias or discrimination. Let's talk about the factor that pushes into aggression, violence, genocide, and all that. That's my answer. And if there is a textbook for discrimination, and what the main step that every group, or those who are ill-intended, evil people who push the masses to discriminate against a minority, always been to dehumanize that to make them less of humans. That's happened to the African Americans, happened to the Japanese in America, it's happened to the Uyghur, it's happening to the Uyghur in China, it's happening to the Rohingya in Burma, in many places around the world. The first step is to dehumanize that group, to make them less of humans. ISIS did that to many groups around them in Iraq, made them less of humans so they can kill them. It's not really a big deal. It's not really, they're not valuable. And that is, in my opinion, is the most dangerous step in any movement that we're trying to push towards discrimination. So whenever you see someone who's trying to make others less of a human than us, that's when we should stop. You know what? Our kids are not more valuable than humans. If you see, for example, on TV, a child is missing, they make a big deal about it. She's a white child. She's black. That's the human message.
Yeah.
Or that's the human message. That's what we should know. Everybody who's that child has a mother who's crying right now as much as the mother of the other child. So we want to make sure that we do not allow anybody to dehumanize another because of the
I want to talk a little bit about trans people in India. So I know trans people are different here, but during my master's, I did a thesis on just like the history of understanding who they are, because just to give you a little bit of background, so trans people belong to a minority community in India. And in order to survive, they beg for alms on the streets. So growing up, I was taught, don't go near them, don't talk to them because they will hurt you. But I've seen them many times, bang on the window, on the car window while we're on the street, lower the window and beg for alms. And when we give them money, they bless us. When we don't, they curse us. Mm-hmm. And I see the aggression now. I see why they are being neglected and hated, right? But when I did my thesis, I understood the historical and the cultural context of how they were over generations in the South Asian territories. They were honored as part of being in the king's court. They managed the king's court in several empires. And over the years, transgenders are welcomed to marriage festivities, or when there are events held for newlyweds, they are invited to bless the couple so that their fertility rate increases. So they are almost worshipped and treated like angelic beings in certain communities. But largely, they are ostracized and they are hated and they are neglected because they are called aggressive and they wear a mask. Now, when I was doing my thesis, I wanted to ask myself, do we not wear masks? Do we not categorize that as imposter syndrome? Do we not do the whole fake it till we make it thing? Because we want to belong to a certain group, or we want to be honored, or we want to be part of the larger narrative, right? We as normal people have our own issues. We have our own things that we are dealing with, the pains and traumas that we are dealing with. Maybe we don't spill it out, or we're not as aggressive at the first get-go when somebody meets us, but we have the same pains and traumas as those who are neglected. So discrimination was a choice. So now when I go back, I try to, through social work or through human rights work, I try to sit down and talk to them, help myself understand where they're coming from, what their life is like. So through several activist groups or through several organizations, we're able to help them out. But the negligence of not knowing and to not even encourage our curiosity to understand why the other person is different. This can happen to any of us. We might be wearing a mask right now, and we might be showing ourselves as something else. But to recognize the biases that we have in ourselves, step one, to not discriminate, to not be intolerant, and to not be biased.
I have had the opportunity, I've been a city council person, I've worked for the California State Assembly, and I've worked for Congress. And I really think that discrimination bias, when it becomes a law, and none of us can break a law. So how do we stop that? We get involved with local politics. We try to elect people that believe in human rights, that are not going to pass laws and encourage hatred. And it's just been part of my life. I'm a broken record, but constantly I was so happy. I was in high school when the Civil Rights Bill was passed. And that's, I'm old, but I'm not that old. And it was part of my life, part of my childhood. It allowed me to go to colleges that I was banned from. It allowed people to vote. It allowed you to live in places that you were banned from. And recently, I worked with the city of Culver City, which is a pretty diverse city. Used to be a Sundance, not that long ago. Where Black people not only could not be there, you could hide it. And so there was something going on, and there was a little girl who was 8, and she, because of COVID, her little dance troupe was into the arts, couldn't perform. So as one of the organizers, we said, well, let's have the little dance girls come and dance in the street, you know, because it's outside. And so her wings kept falling off, you know, so I went over, I'm the theater teacher, because in my purse, there's scissors, there's pens, there's needles, there's grit, even now, always. And so I was talking to her, she's 8, and I said, why are you here? And she said, well, I want to do my dance. So I said, no, why are you part of the demonstration? And she described in good detail that people should not be hurt, they should not be killed, that's unfair. And I started to cry because I realized my first demonstration was when I was 8.
Oh.
It was for voting rights. And here we are, now 60 years later, our babies are still having to do the same thing. So you, as responsible, who can elect people that are not gonna create these laws that are discriminatory, you know, discriminatory, because it's hard to break a law. And so you have this whole thing from the Dred Scott decision where Black people were 3/5 of the person. And that's American history. So we need to make sure that we're active in not allowing people who are so-called making laws, because laws are hard to break, and breaking laws have punishment. And number 8 of the Human Rights Declaration says human rights to be protected by law, not dismissed.
Thank you very much. Okay, this will be the last question. Which of the 30 human rights listed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is your favorite human right and why?
Yeah, so many good ones, huh? Mine is responsibility. You know, me having the responsibility to not only protect my own, but to protect others and make this a known fact for everyone, because I think it's easy to say that if every single one, the violation of your human rights is a violation of my human rights, right? And we have the duty and the job to protect each other here on earth and to have a surviving society.
Thank you.
On 4th of July, I have a sermon, which I gave here at a different mosque, about the freedoms and the rights, the human rights that our faith gives us. And so most of these 30 are having special term for faith, that freedom of religion, pro-life, all that. But my personal favorite one is because I grew up, I was told always I have a big mouth. I like to talk. I always got in trouble because of that. So the freedom of expression, freedom of speech would be my favorite.
Thank you. My favorite is Article 18, the right to our own beliefs, to have a religion, have no religion, or to change it. I think change it was so powerful for me because I grew up in a religious household, grew up with Christian missionaries. But the religion itself, though the religion itself said that women cannot be in leadership, women cannot be in certain roles in the house or outside the house, my God didn't say that. He always sat down with women from different backgrounds. He sought out the women and he went to them and he spoke to them on the well or out in the open and had a conversation where he gave them a chance to transform. He gave them an avenue to change. And when I thought about it that way, when I saw religion that way, I was like, my core belief is still the same. And I choose to base my beliefs on freedom. So the question I asked myself was, are you going to believe in your God from a place of hostility or kind of like from a prison or for freedom? So prison is based on rules, based on legalism, based on these are the commands, and this is the mold that I have for you, and this is what you should follow, or for a place of freedom. I chose freedom as my core belief, and I was able to give myself, thankfully, and now I'm able to give that freedom to others. And one thing that I always think about is Jesus always went for the one. He didn't go for the multitudes. When he went for the one, the multitudes came to him. And my job as a South Asian female Christian in media is to go for the one, make space for the one. Whether they're marginalized, whether they're ostracized, neglected, they're a minority, or they're called as untouchables. My job is to make space for them, whether little or large, that takes a conversation. But I will make space for the one.
Well, everyone's taken mine. But there's two that are really, well, the freedom of expression, of course. I've been expressing myself since I was taught, and often in trouble with my parents for expressing myself. But there are two that are really important to me. One is responsibility. I have a PhD, which is basically really boring. And I've studied a lot of different religions. We look at the 12 commandments, the basic commandments of Islam, the basic commandments of the Sheiks, and the basic commandment of Christians, the way to happiness, the 12 commandments. None of these religions are about hate. None of them are about hate. None of them in the text tell you to hate and to hurt. But men do that and women do that. And so you need to know that. So 29, we have the responsibility to be educated, to be aware, and to be a change agent. You know, and that really is what is important to me. And like the coach down there, number 24, the right to play. One of the greatest compliment I got from my kids. I have 35 kids working on the Midsummer Night's Dream, August 1st, 100 women, ages 6 through 13. And they were telling me I'm the silliest grown up they ever met. And I think that when we relax and I treat my little ones like adults, in the sense that if you're going to have enough nerve to put on a costume and get up in front of somebody else, then you need to be responsible and you have an obligation, and let's all have fun doing this. So I am so grateful to Betsy and to Shania and Mary for, we had a joke. They would invite me over to tea, and if there was a tree around, I would be suckered into doing some major project here. And so I have for a number of years done Christmas shows and musicals and on the street, bringing all these children together. And we all are skipping and jumping and having a great time. And race or sex or gender or age is not a concern. And when we do that, when we play, when we take responsibility, then little by little, you're changing the world. And watching these kids win the play, how they're relating to Chinese kids and African kids and kids that in this LA County would never know each other. But we bring them together and they're there to express themselves and they're there to play. And those relationships, God, these kids will not go away. I've had them for like 18 years or something. Go away. They're bringing me their children, which is a real honor. You bring somebody your kid, you know. So I think 29, responsibility, and 24, the lunch.
All right. Well, with that, I would like to give all of our speakers a very loud